The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports. You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers.
With Auburn being number one in the AP poll yesterday, Alabama being number two, and then Alabama being number one in the coaches poll, and Auburn being number two. Somehow, this is the first time in the history of SEC basketball where the number one team will play the number two team in the country. How has that never happened in SEC basketball play before? You tell me. I have no clue, but it's awesome that Auburn's part of history, Kyle.
I have no idea how that's never happened. I mean, think of all the really good teams. Like it's crazy. That like a Kentucky and a Florida, or a Kentucky and a Tennessee, or a Tennessee and Florida, or somebody like that. Like
Arkansas, like they've had their
Arkansas,
runs. I mean, crazy.
Arkansas's one. Yeah, exactly. How has that never happened? It blows my mind, and it's kind of really, really cool that Auburn gets to be a part of it. And even crazier, it's Auburn versus Alabama. Like the intensity, it almost feels like they set it up that way. Like maybe it's just kind of a made for TV thing, but it did work out. They are probably the two best teams in the country.
I mean, the level of passion and disgust. I'm really trying to not use the word hate, but it's really tough to describe the situation without it. But I mean, these two fan bases over everything. Like it's just they're nitpicking each other's resumes. I mean, after Auburn lost to Florida on Saturday and Alabama held on against Arkansas, just both fan bases going back and forth on who should be number one. There's just going to be so much, I don't want to say pent up emotion, just general emotion that happens in Tuscaloosa Saturday afternoon. It's, it's going to be insane. It's going to be insane.
I'm going to say something crazy right now. Okay.
Reckless? Are you about to be reckless?
You may think this is crazy, but I think I dislike Alabama basketball infinitely more than I dislike Alabama football. I don't know why. I dislike Alabama basketball on the level that I dislike Georgia football. Legitimately, I think I dislike. I think I'm serious. I think that's reality. Is that crazy?
Yes.
Yes. I don't know.
Yes, I think so. I
think it's because I just grew to just respect what happened in Alabama football. Like it just was what it was. And we're actually really good at basketball. And it's like the one thing you may have that you can kind of hold against them. And now they're getting really good at basketball. And I just don't like Nate Oates. Nate Oates is not very likable in general. Nick Saban kind of had like the grandpa likable vibe that you just sort of respected him.
Later at Alabama.
Exactly.
I think the first half of his tenure at Alabama, I don't think there's any way you would say that.
From about 2020 on, to me, he was fine. I kind of enjoyed. It did
feel different, and I don't know if that was just because it was we just got so used to them winning, or what. But this game, man, like it doesn't really feel like. One, doesn't feel like Auburn plays a game tonight. For one,
yeah.
I mean, does this scream potential trap game, with Auburn playing Vanderbilt on the road tonight? Like, I don't know. Because we're all so focused on Saturday, and it's like, well, it's going to be big no matter what, because they still will both be number one on respective polls, but it will lose a little bit of luster, I think. So Auburn's got to take care of business against Vandy first.
I don't think it'll lose luster. I mean, look, I don't think you can look over Vandy. You can't. Even though you're a 10-point team, you're a 10-point favorite. It's like 9.5 points, I think, on the road. But that arena, we just have so many demons there. We can't win there. So you can't. If you overlook them, you're going to walk into Alabama with 2 losses in a row, and you're staring at number 3 because they're going to be tough to beat on the road as well. So, I mean, you'd be foolish to overlook Vandy at this point in time, no matter who's going to be there Saturday. Game day, Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's calling the game. Doesn't matter what's going on pregame. If you overlook Vandy, you're going to get your butt whipped.
Yeah, no question about it. And so, I mean, if you're Auburn, different people feel differently about, dropping a game and if it's a wake up call and all that. Maybe so. Like Auburn didn't drop in the rankings, so like, do you get the wake up call that you needed, or just like the loss itself? Is that enough? Like, I don't fully know, and I don't know if you tuned into this or not, Kyle, but like Daryl and I had this debate where like a lot of Auburn fans, it was like this weird split of a loss is good. A loss is good for us. It keeps us focused. Maybe it takes the pressure off. I'm like, does it? You're still number one. I don't know. Then the other half of it is, oh my goodness, we're about to fall apart. We're about to lose 3 straight games, and Bruce Pearl's going to go to Indiana. Like that's the other side of the coin, which the truth is somewhere in the middle. And I do think it's closer to the former. I do think it's closer to maybe this does take off some of the pressure. Maybe this does give this coaching staff some room to say, hey, what you're doing, is it good enough to achieve all the things that you're perfectly capable of achieving? Where are you on that spectrum, do you think?
So I feel like sometimes you can sleepwalk a little bit offensively. I think you can kind of lean on guy like Janai bailing you out, or you can lean on guys hitting some threes and it kind of bail you out and limp into a win. I don't feel like you can sleepwalk on the defensive side. And that's why I felt like for the longest time, Auburn didn't necessarily have to win. Like there was no loss that could get you locked back in, because you have to be locked in on the defensive side. And they were playing such good defense. And then Florida comes along and just absolutely, I don't care what the score was. People were arguing with me that it wasn't a blowout. That was a blowout. They beat our tail.
I had that same argument with some folks Sunday morning. I'm like, the game was not like the game was never way more lopsided.
It was never close. It was never close. And they beat you on the offensive end. They scored on you at will. And to me, that should be a wake-up call that, hey, look, we have been limp. We've just out-talented people on defense, but we weren't completely locked in, and a really good team came along and exposed us. And, maybe we lost our focus a little bit. Who knows? But that should be able to, hopefully that's a little bit of a wake-up call on the defensive side that, hey, you may sleepwalk on offense, but if you sleepwalk on defense, you'll get your tail beat. Especially this back half of the schedule is tough, man. It's tough, and it's not getting any easier. There's no breaks, and you start it tonight.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. I'm looking tonight at Grizzlies Suns, the Grizzlies favored on the road amid all the trade drama in Phoenix, but they're laying just 2 points. Yes, thank you very much. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
They got him. Nick Polk is joining the Florida Gators front office.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators.
The Florida Gators have made their official hire. It's Nick Polk, and it's interesting because we were told it wouldn't be a general manager job. But when the Florida Gators officially announced the hire yesterday, but they hired him yesterday, and then the Florida Gators football Twitter account tweeted out the graphic, which is usually how a lot of people go, oh, now it's official. They tweeted it out as Nick Polk, Associate AD, so Associate Athletic Director, / Football GM. That leaves me with 2 questions. One, the Associate AD part. We've kind of heard this talked about before, and we've seen other teams take this approach, or other schools take this approach, that you have your AD, and then you get an Associate AD of football or above a football program. that essentially the AD now takes a step back and they focus on the other parts of the school. And then the associate AD essentially just takes the reins of football there. So hopefully that means that Scott Strickland will step away from football a little bit, hopefully. But also, I'm very curious what it means as far as Jacob LaFrance, because Jacob LaFrance is currently listed as the Florida Gators general manager, but Nick Polk has now taken that. And a week or two ago, we were told, we're not expecting much to happen with Jacob LaFrance. Like he's still going to be there. He's still going to be the GM. He's still going to have all that. So I'm very curious what that means for Jacob LaFrance and Scott Strickland. I'm assuming we'll get answers eventually. But yeah, I'm very, very curious to see how that plays out. But Nick Polk, who was the hire, was the Atlanta Falcons director of football operations for the final, I believe it was 5 years of his tenure with the Atlanta Falcons. He was there for 17 years. He was a key part in managing their cap, which I will say this. Being a key part in managing a program's cap or an NFL team's cap is not the same thing as being the GM, is not the same thing as deciding how much people make. It's not that. I would imagine that it's more, or not even imagine, that it's more about determining the value you should be willing to spend, how much money you should allocate to certain positions, how much money you should allocate to starter at this position, backup at this position, and work out all that. And have a lot of say in things, but not be the final word. I want to make that abundantly clear. I will also say this, and I'm not saying that Nick Polk was good or bad at this, and teams have gotten way more creative with how they attack contracts in the past few years. But for me, when I look at current front office members of the NFL, I also look at their ability to get out of contracts, like the Daniel Jones contract. Daniel Jones did not deserve a contract extension. John Mara essentially forced it, which led Saquon to leave to the Philadelphia Eagles and win a Super Bowl. Congratulations, Saquon. Hate everything else about it. Gonna be honest with you. But Joe Shane at least did a good thing of making sure it was a contract that the Giants could get out of after the second season. At least there was that. It was a bad deal, I get that, but that's also a thing where it's important when we talk about these NFL executives and NFL minds that we're going to continue talking about in college football in modern day because they're so similar now. It's important to acknowledge that there's levels to it, right? He never signs a bad contract, or he never overpays, or hey, he might overpay, but he gives them an out. That's also an important part of this. So that's important as well. Nick Polk has a reputation for being just meticulous. I reached out to as many people as I could that might have a connection to Nick Polk. Okay. The hire got made, or the hire got announced, and I was in the texting and Twitter DMs for hours after that. Okay. We were talking about him. I did my best to get firsthand accounts on Nick Polk. I am especially interested to see how his NFL Europe experience plays in here. And I think that's important to acknowledge because Nick Polk was with NFL Europe, and NFL Europe, of course, was an experience, as we'll say short-lived as it was compared to, the NFL and everything, as short-lived as it was, but it was a whole new world, right? It was a whole new world of football. Now we're basically in a whole new world of college football. We are. It's a whole new era. I know that I mention it a lot, but do you know why I mention it a lot? Why I mention that college football has changed and has become very NFL-like? Do you know why I mention it? Because I still get the comments about it that are, the old days were better. That's fine if that's your opinion. It doesn't change that we're in a new era. This is not the era that you, myself, or even if you have a 6-year-old, this is not the era that anybody there grew up with. Okay? This is different. And the Florida Gators, again, as critical as I've been about a lot of things, I think they're taking the right approach here. Okay? And Nick Polk, he's been in a whole new world before. He's been in a whole new environment before. In fact, he's done it kind of multiple times on a personal level. Going with NFL Europe and then climbing the ladder with the Falcons and then going to Athletes First where he was since leaving the Falcons. He's been there. He's done a lot of unique things. He's been in unique situations. And so for him to help Florida get ushered into this new era of college football, I think it's a big plus. I'm not going to lie to you. And also as far as an overseer of football operations, that's huge. I think he'll do a good job there. And like I mentioned, he was with Athletes First previously. So to me, and we talked about this a lot last week, a lot of things are about who you know, right? And if you were with Athletes First, which is one of the largest sports agencies on the planet, I'd say they're probably top 3 or 4 sports agencies in football right now. It's Rosenhaus, it's Athletes First, it's Clutch. I'm sure I'm overlooking some CAA maybe. The one with the W, Wasserman maybe, something like that. There's some power agencies. Athletes First is one of them. Okay, Athletes First has a lot of people making a lot of money on that team. So that will maybe help Florida because Athletes First does represent some college players. That will maybe help Florida when it comes time to negotiating, when it comes time to figuring out actual value, when it comes time to, getting a little nudge and like, hey, this guy might hit the portal.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. Imagine going to the big game this Sunday. That's what a lot of the people around me here on Radio Row are going to do, and the fans who are coming to New Orleans. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have time searching. Inspiration makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and take the work on tickets. Gametime. Download Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame just made a big splash by hiring running back coach Jaywan Sider away from Penn State.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Some other moves that we need to talk about today, including Notre Dame's search for a general manager, because I realize that after James Blanchard, the general manager at Texas Tech, turned down Notre Dame's offer, I had not had the chance to talk about it on the show because on Sunday I did my instant reaction to the Blanchard news, and then on Monday I released an episode with Brian Smith, Locked On's recruiting insider. It was a crossover episode with his new show, The Portal, so I have not really had a chance to talk about James Blanchard. And considering how close that deal came to being finalized, and now Notre Dame is hiring Jaywan Sider, and that move has not been made officially official by the school, a lot of people are equating the two, and I think there are two very different circumstances involved here. So I'm going to get into that before we bring on Zach. And also, there are other schools working hard to try to poach Notre Dame's current staff members, like Mike Mickens, who is recently tied to the secondaries opening at Texas. So we're going to discuss all of that before we bring Zach on. But here's the first thing. James Blanchard turned Notre Dame down, and I obviously talked about him a lot on the show last week. And there was actually a moment after, I think the second episode I did where I was talking about him, where I was like, he's going to end up not going to Notre Dame, and I'm going to end up looking like a big idiot. Now, whenever I did talk about him, I always talked about him as a potential GM. I never once said that the move was official, but it was damn near close. Blanchard flew in to South Bend. He met with Marcus Freeman. He met with the Notre Dame staff. He was in the Goog meeting people. As I understand it, a deal was agreed upon. His responsibilities were agreed upon, but ultimately it fell through due to different circumstances that, I haven't been able to finalize, but I've heard some different things. And I think basically life just got in the way for James Blanchard, and he wanted to stay at home in Texas, which is where he has spent his entire life. He's got 5 kids. He would have had to uproot his entire family to move from Texas to South Bend. And even though at one point during the process, it looked like he was ready to make that move, ultimately, it didn't happen. And it is a bummer for Notre Dame because, like I said last week, I thought Blanchard would have been a great hire for the role, but ultimately it didn't happen. But I think the thing here is ultimately Blanchard's desire to stay home was more important to him. And also Notre Dame has a little bit more time to make the general manager hire, whereas they needed to get a running back coach in a hurry. And that's exactly what they did. And they hit as close to a home run as you could possibly get. Now, I am always cautious of saying that any move is going to work perfectly because you never really know exactly just how it's going to pan out. But when you look at Ja'Juan Seider's background, his track record, what he's known for as a recruiter, his fit with the scheme and culture of the Notre Dame football program, I think he's a great hire. Now, are obviously going to see how it pans out, but that deal is done. Even though it's not official by the school, I know that there are some people who are concerned that it's going to be another James Blanchard situation. These two things are very different. Even though the school, they like to take their time, like it took forever for the Chris Ash news to become official. We all knew that was a done deal. This is a done deal as well. But the James Blanchard deal, it never really got to that point. Like you've already got ESPN's Pete Thamel, Bruce Feldman of The Athletic, Poop Sampson. Everyone is reporting that the Seider deal is done and finalized. We're just waiting for an official announcement from the school. It never got to that point with James Blanchard. Now, there were reports that the deal was, quote, on the 1-yard line, that he was the top target and things like that. And that's all true. But there was always a question of, well, is he going to accept it? Well, as I understand it, Seider has already accepted the job with Notre Dame. He's told recruits and things like that. So that deal is done. So I'm telling you, if this ends up falling through, then you can come at me in the comments and call me the biggest idiot alive. But I feel very confident that this Ja'Juan Seider move is going to be announced here very soon. And I never felt just as confident. I certainly felt like James Blanchard was going to be the next general manager at Notre Dame, but it didn't happen. And I guess looking back, maybe I could have emphasized that even more, that the deal was not done and he still had a decision to make. But hey, we're doing the show every day. I'm going to make some mistakes along the way, but I do feel very confident about the direction of Notre Dame going forward because they made a great hire at running back coach, and I think that they're going to make a great hire at general manager. One name that's been thrown around there is Zach Grant, the general manager at Cincinnati. He's a Notre Dame grad, and I think that there's obvious connections there. He's done a pretty good job. Now, the responsibilities of being at Notre Dame come with a lot more stakes as well, just moving to a program that wants to be in the national championship every single year. But I know that he comes really highly respected. So that's a potential option. Notre Dame is also looking at the general manager from Iowa as well. So those are two names to consider. But I think that Marcus Freeman is going to take his time as he makes his hire because this is a very important decision. And they aren't quite on the timeline as they were with the running back coach. But it's not just those two guys, right? Or not those two positions, running back coach and general manager. They also have to make sure that they retain Mike Mickens and every other member on the staff, because whenever you think that the coaching carousel is done, then news breaks and then you're in need for another assistant, right? Like a couple weeks ago, it looked like Dylan McCullough was going to stay at Notre Dame, and then things happened, and now he's with the Las Vegas Raiders. There was a report that came out on Monday, I believe, that Texas is pursuing Mike Mickens to be their coach. Now, that's all that is right now. It's just a report. We don't know if he's interviewed or anything like that. We don't even know if he's interested in the job. But this is something that I am monitoring closely because I think the fact that he was passed over for the defensive coordinator job probably hurt some feelings along the way. And I totally get it. He thinks he's ready to be a defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman said as much in a press conference, but clearly Marcus Freeman doesn't believe that Mike Mickens is ready to be the defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. Probably because he has no prior experience as the defensive coordinator. So if Mike Mickens thinks it's best for him to go somewhere else and that gets him closer to being a coordinator and eventually a head coach, maybe he ends up making that move, because I think that's exactly what Ja'Juan Seider is doing when he left Penn State to come to Notre Dame. I think he looks at this move as a stepping stone to become a head coach because that's what he wants to do. He's been pretty open about that. I think that's why Dylan McCullough left Notre Dame. So if Mike Mickens ends up making that decision, then that's something that Notre Dame is going to have to deal with, because we all know Mike Mickens is one of, if not the best coaches of defensive backs in all of college football. But again, that is just a report. Notre Dame is going to work really hard to retain him. Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens go way back. So I believe that ultimately Notre Dame and Mickens will be able to get a deal done. I do find it interesting that there has not been any official announcement of Mickens' promotion to co-defensive coordinator. That was talked about a lot when Notre Dame hired Chris Ash, because, like I said, a lot of people expected Mike Mickens to be the defensive coordinator. There were multiple reports that Notre Dame was working to promote Mickens to a co-DC role along with Chris Ash. The university has officially announced the hire of Chris Ash, but they have not announced a promotion for Mike Mickens to be co-DC. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I just find it interesting that it has not happened yet. So whenever we hear from Marcus Freeman next, I'm sure that will all get straightened away. But for now, Notre Dame has to work hard to keep Mickens, and they have to take their time and make sure that they nail this hire at general manager, because it is a very important position. And even though they have some time and they didn't get their top target in James Blanchard, there's still an opportunity for them to make a great hire. Because if you think about it, like a couple years ago, Notre Dame swung and missed on a very, very public display with Andy Ludwig to be their next offensive coordinator. It felt like a big loss at the time. And even though Notre Dame had to settle with Jared Parker, I think it's fair to say they had to settle because he wasn't one of their top 3 choices. Then he ended up leaving a year later, and then Notre Dame ended up getting Mike Denbrock, who's widely regarded as one of the best coordinators in all of college football, and Andy Ludwig got fired from Utah. So it's crazy how these things turn out, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot more moves to talk about in the near future. When that comes, we will talk about it. Zach Seiko from Locked On Nittany Lions is back with me here to help us get a better understanding of Notre Dame's next running back coach, Juwan Sider, after he spent the past 7 seasons with Penn State. Zach, I want to get into the how and why this happened, because I think it took a lot of people by surprise. But to start, can you just give us some background on Sider's time in State College and what made him such a valuable part of Penn State's staff?
Well, Tyler, I'm glad we get to team up again, not under these circumstances, but I guess this is Notre Dame beat Penn State once, and now they beat them again in the offseason here. I mean, this is a massive loss in my mind. J1 has been with Penn State staff for 7 years, as you've mentioned. He's an elite recruiter. He's nationally recognized as one of the best overall recruiters, regardless of position, regardless of institution, now at Notre Dame. So Notre Dame making a move that is going to at least give them a lot, because he has built up connections in, obviously, Florida, which is where he spent a lot of time of his life. But now being at Penn State and being settled there, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, Notre Dame and Penn State have certainly gone up for common recruits, Nicholas Singleton being one of them. And J1 Sider has always been that guy that's been able to continue to not only get the best of the best running backs, but also make inroads for top-end Florida prospects and other prospects that necessarily weren't with his position group. Running back, linebacker, or running back, yes, but linebacker, tight end, offensive line, where he's just able to build that connection. So above all else, you're getting a great recruiter. People that question him about his development of running backs, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are great. He coached up Miles Sanders for one season. There are some other prospects that people are going to point to that say that they never panned out, and I think it actually has to relate to the player itself more so than the coach. So Notre Dame is getting a really talented running backs coach in his own right. He's just a great person. He's easy to get along with. He's a glue guy. And I think people that overlook this and say, well, it's a lateral move, Penn State will be just fine. That may be true. Penn State will be able to recover from this, but it's not ideal, and especially at this point in the offseason when winter workouts have just picked back up.
Yeah, the timing is certainly a surprise, especially when you consider the fact that Penn State has 2 of the best running backs in all of college football, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, coming back next year. And Penn State has a great history of developing running backs. Even before Sider was there, they had a guy that some people might know. His name's Saquon Barkley, and he's doing
Super
all
Bowl
right.
Guy?
Yeah. He actually, not even that good of a game in the Super Bowl, but hey, he's a champion, and he has the single season rushing record now in the NFL. But what changed once Sider got on board? Because they really just took that development to a whole nother level. Like, what has been his impact on Penn State's running back room over the years?
Like, it's the consistency, it's the continuity, it's building relationships, it's dominating the state as Penn State emphasizes, and then being able to branch out, because he has been able to connect in more than just Pennsylvania. Obviously, the state of Florida, state of Virginia too. So it's building those connections, it's building those relationships. The way that he's been able to develop the running back room, people want to point that, oh, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen should be better. Well, I mean, shouldn't any of us? There's always room for improvement everywhere, but Sider did get the most out of players like Journey Brown, who had to medically retire. He had off-season health issues that forced him to retire out of football, and he was a fringe 3-star that probably was going to be taken in the second or third round of an NFL draft. So the question marks that are about his coaching and if he can actually develop running backs, from what I've seen, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen have lived up to their expectations. They just haven't been healthy the entire time along the way. But when they are at 100%, they look like their best. So for Sider, he is as good as advertised. And then there's the recruiting element of it. For Penn State, I don't like the idea of Penn State having to face him now, because he was interviewing around for head coaching jobs, particularly one, Florida Atlantic. He was linked to the Florida Atlantic head coaching job, didn't get it this cycle, and this is something that's been an interest of his in past cycles when it was open. But so this lateral move is surprising because he's wanted to see a head coaching opportunity, maybe an offensive coordinator opportunity. He interviewed for Penn State's open OC job before Andy Kotelnicki became the hire. So there's the reason he's leaving Penn State to make this lateral move, to kind of make sense of all of it, is he's been there for 7 years. It's a change of scenery. I know Notre Dame's a private institution, so we'll never truly know his contract details, but I got to imagine they're going to make him one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid position coach in all of college football. That would not surprise me in the slightest. Penn State just did it with Jim Knowles as a defensive coordinator, so I can understand that respect to Sider. But Sider, I think just being around Penn State for a long time, and really he can't move up anymore. Andy Kotelnicki got the offensive coordinator job. You can only give him so many more titles, and Penn State just spent a lot of money for Jim Knowles. So this Notre Dame move, while it doesn't make sense, it really does.
Okay, I have a couple follow-ups there, but you said something that kind of caught me by surprise. So you mentioned that some Penn State fans, or maybe just critics in general, said that Sider isn't as good at developing, which I find really hard to believe, because Notre Dame just got to see Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen up close, and they look pretty damn developed. So I guess give us more context behind those concerns.
I hope that it's more of a fringe, a smaller group. I've just seen that, they could be better. That this is okay because J1 Sider didn't get the most out of Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. And I have to disagree, because Singleton came in as this elusive running back. He's the home run hitter. But he didn't do it all the time. Do you know how hard it is to break off 70, 80-yard touchdowns? Come on, those expectations are pretty lofty. Both Katron Allen and Singleton battled injuries this junior season, and they still got a lot out of them. I look at the weaknesses that, for example, Singleton came in with in terms of blocking ability, catching ability, and he added that to his arsenal. Katron Allen's kind of always been this do everything type of running back, where he has the vision, he can hit the lanes, he is able to block, he can catch the ball out of the backfield, but his speed, his athleticism, his agility could be better. And that's why Singleton and Allen complemented each other so well, because it was truly a dynamic of thunder and lightning. And I feel like Sider, under the circumstances, did maximize that. To say that Singleton had this incredible freshman season and fell off is just not true. Mike Yurcich was the offensive coordinator once upon a time. Penn State offensively was not maximizing its overall ability, but I still think Sider deserves a lot of credit. Did they miss on the likes of a Ricky Slade? Yes. Devin Ford, you know Devin Ford very well. Did he materialize at Penn State the way that he should have? Not necessarily, but I think the other Noah Cain dealt with injuries. Journey Brown literally had to medically retire. And Singleton and Allen are well on their way. They should have been top 5 running backs, conservatively top 10 in this year's NFL draft, and Sider deserves credit for that.